Welcome to our study of Oedipus the King by Sophocles. You'll find Oedipus the King is in Volume A of your anthology. So let's start by talking a little about Sophocles. Who was he? Sophocles grew up in the village of Colonus, a short distance north of Athens, and was likely from a wealthy family and received a good education because the wealthy families were the ones who could afford giving good educations to their children. Athens was a major power in the Mediterranean world during this period known as the Golden or Classical Age until the start of the Peloponnesian War in 431 BC. Sophocles made technical changes to theater, including the use of scene painting and enlargement of the chorus. He also brought in a third character, a tritagonist, for complex dialogues. Before we start really talking about Oedipus the King, we need to understand a little more about tragedy. It's Aristotle who outlines the content for really good tragedy. Aristotle said tragedy should imitate real, serious, and completed action. It may use stylized language that would embellish different parts to make the tragedy really stand out even more. It should also induce catharsis, this kind of outpouring of pity and fear from the audience, and it would mix metrical speech and song. Aristotle also outlined the 6 elements of tragedy: plot, character, language, thought, spectacle, and melody. These 6 elements are divided into the form, the manner of presentation, and the objects of imitation. Aristotle believed that plot should be non-episodic and should follow the structure of recognition so that the character realizes his predicament. So there's no surprise to the character. The character understands his tragic situation. Also, catharsis, the character and the audience are inspired to fear and pity. And then reversal, the change in plot line to achieve stasis at the end of the play. So tragic plays should also have unhappy endings. Obviously, right? We can't all have a fairy tale ending. Aristotle was the one who said that and outlined it first to say, look, if it's a tragedy, it needs to have that tragic ending. So stick with that. The characters should behave and experience what is probable and inevitable, and the gods shouldn't be relied on to resolve these events that are central, unless they're central to the play's action to begin with. So if the tragedy involves gods or goddesses, then it wouldn't be unbelievable that a god or goddess might intervene in the tragedy. However, unless gods and goddesses are involved specifically in the tragedy, then they shouldn't have a role in fixing it or tidying it up to a happy ending at the end. The chorus also, in Aristotle's opinion, was not just an arbitrary character in the play, but it was very vital in the play. It played a role in the religious rites from which the tragedy evolved, and it should play an integral role in the performance. Plot is the sequence of events, and according to Aristotle, the most essential part of tragedy, because tragedy is a representation of human action. In his Poetics, Aristotle lists all the elements of theater in the following order: plot, character, thought, diction, music, and spectacle. So as we just touched on, the elements of plot, according to Aristotle, were recognition. The main character needs to understand that they recognize the tragedy, or that tragedy is upon them. And catharsis, that feeling of pity or sympathy that the audience would feel, or that the character would feel. And then this idea of reversal of fortune. One example of recognition and reversal happens when the messenger arrives to tell Oedipus that Polybus of Corinth is dead and that Oedipus will be the new king. These good tidings quickly end when it's revealed that Polybus is not Oedipus's true father, and that a herdsman gave the child to the messenger many years ago. This rapid juxtaposition of recognitions and reversals and the ebb and flow of the plot add dramatic intensity and build interest and suspense from beginning to end, and it goes back and forth in Oedipus the King. We've talked a little bit about catharsis. Catharsis is the release of this extreme emotion for the audience. It's related to both fear and anxiety, so it's very intense. Hamartia is a Greek concept translated as mistake. Now, this mistake is not an intentional bad deed or evil character, but instead it's some tragic flaw or twist of fate that's out of the protagonist's hands. In this play, Oedipus does not kill Polybus and bed Jocasta out of some incestuous desire or perversion. Rather, the entire city and Oedipus suffer on account of a mistake made by his parents, who didn't ensure that he was executed at birth. So let's talk about some of the interesting characters in this play. The Sphinx is one. Ironically, while Oedipus knows the answer to the Sphinx's riddle, which is mankind, he doesn't know the answer to more fundamental questions like who he is. He doesn't know who his parents really are. He doesn't realize that he's killed his father and married his mother, and that now he's both father and brother to his two children. I mean, it gets kind of crazy in here. The Sphinx has feminine characteristics, is merciless, cunning, and is this lion bird woman character. But it's ironic because you'll see as we get to the oracle, there's the phrase "know thyself" above where you enter the oracle. So while Oedipus knows the answer to this riddle for the Sphinx, he does not know himself at all. One of the interesting themes that you'll see developing throughout the story is adoption. According to Sophocles, Laos, king of Thebes, learned from the oracle at Delphi that his son would grow up to kill him. So he ordered a shepherd to have his son by Jocasta exposed on a mountain. This exposure was actually, we can't imagine it today, but back in ancient times it was a pretty common practice, and it involved leaving a baby in a wild place just to leave them there to die. This was seen as more humane as, a stabbing or some sort of execution-style death. It allowed parents to dispose of unwanted children without that kind of guilt, without having that blood on their hands. A shepherd, however, discovers the infant and takes him to Corinth, where he's raised by King Polybus and Queen Merope. So when you're reading through and you see the name Tiresias, you may think, hey, where do I know that name from? Well, you know it from the Odyssey, because Tiresias also appeared in the Odyssey. He's in some other works too. One myth explains Tiresias's physical blindness as a punishment by the goddess Hera. Tiresias had judged unfavorably, according to Hera anyway, in a debate as to whether it was men or women who enjoyed sexual intercourse more. Having lived at one point as a woman, Tiresias responded that 90% of sexual pleasure belonged to the women, while men only gained 10% of the total pleasure. So this infuriated Hera, who was furious over his claim, given the fact that her husband was Zeus and his sexual proclivities. So she blinds Tiresias to punish him for his statement, but Zeus empowers him with the gift of foresight to compensate for the loss of his eyesight. This scene between Tiresias and Oedipus dramatizes the paradox of vision in the play. The old prophet is blind. He has no physical sight, but he can still see the truth. Oedipus has vision. He does have physical sight, but he doesn't know who he is or where he's from. Having answered the riddle of the Sphinx, Oedipus has this confidence then to solve the present problem of the play in finding Laius' murderer and the cause of this pestilence. Oedipus's confidence leads him astray from reason. When Tiresias the seer formulates these riddles about Oedipus and the identity of the murderer, Oedipus doesn't even consider dropping his investigation and inquiry. Students may notice that in this Oedipus cycle, Oedipus gains the powers of prophecy after physically blinding himself. So think, as you're reading this, how are sensory vision and fortune telling related or at odds with each other throughout this play? This play also deals with politics. Oedipus is a tyrannical figure from the mythic past conceived by Sophocles in the age of democracy. A very different leader than Oedipus, Creon is more reserved, deliberate, and smooth in speech. His character is consistent in subsequent plays such as Antigone and Oedipus at Colonus. Creon's reliance upon law and order leads to tragedy in Antigone, while his decency and fairness provide Oedipus a final haven in Oedipus at Colonus. While Oedipus displays many qualities of an arrogant despot, Creon seems specifically characterized as a democratic leader. So, as we started initially talking about Aristotle's ideals for Greek tragedy, we mentioned the chorus. So, the chorus in the Greek tragedy is in place to iterate the god's decree and to guide the audience in how they should perceive the play's context. It really kind of helps pinpoint the moral or lesson for the audience. In this play, Oedipus the King, the chorus clearly states that no human can be exempt from suffering in this world, that peace is achieved, and God's folly for twisting man's fate is removed only after a person dies. So as you read, think about this theme and how this theme is pervasive throughout the play. And also ask yourself, is this a tragic theme? So that wraps up our slides for Oedipus the King. I'll be sure to post some videos for you to look at too, so you can kind of keep track of things. Sometimes visuals help. Do not rely on the videos though. You still need to read the material because you'll need to analyze that. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to drop me a message.